Bipul Chandra Bhuiya sir. Now may I request Dr. Bhuiya sir to deliver his inaugural speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paula Henrik. Good afternoon to everyone present here. Respected research person,
Yeah, Hussein, please stop sharing.
Dr. Bibhash Choudhury, Professor, Department of English, Gauhati University, Coordinator IQAC HPB Girls College, Dr. Paula Henrik, Dr. Deepak Fukan Borua, SOD Department of English, HPB Girls College, Dr. Dibbajyoti Bora, Assistant Professor, Department of English, HPB Girls College, and all the members of the organizing committee, participants, and my dear students. It is my pleasure and great privilege to welcome you all to this webinar on pandemic, reading, culture, and changing nature of books, organized by IQAC and Department of English, HPB Girls College, Golaghat. Respected dignitaries, I'd like to take the opportunity to speak a few words about our college. Hemapapa Barbara Girls College, Golaghat was established in the year 1969. In the process of establishing the college, a noble-minded donor, late Alok Chandra Barbara, came forward and offered 75,000 rupees in the glorious memories of his mother, late Hemaprabha Barbara. So it has made significant strides in its development to become one of the leading colleges in the district, imparting instructions in almost all the subjects in higher secondary and undergraduate level, including major courses. The National Assessment and Accreditation Council visited this college in 2012 and accredited it with high B grade. Gauhati Higher Education Department, Assam, has already approved HPB Girls College, Golaghat for opening science stream, along with other 49 colleges of Assam. It has already been started. Moreover, there are some vocational courses like Diploma in Computer Application, Spoken English, Cutting and Tailoring, Food Processing, and Food Preservation, Beauty Therapy, and Hairdressing, etc. Postgraduate courses in Assamese, English, Economics, Education, Political Science, and Sociology have been introduced under the Directorate of Open and Distance Learning, Bibhash University. Now the college is celebrating its Golden Jubilee year, and it becomes an outstanding temple of wisdom, fulfilling the hope and aspiration of its stakeholder. Attempt has been made to create employable human resource by developing skills, information process, efficiency, and introducing various training programs in the college. A lot of initiatives were taken up and implemented to enhance the quality of education and improvement of all facilities. Here, a student enters as a girl and step out as a responsible and well-informed citizen of the country with self-confidence to face the world of challenges. Besides the infrastructural facilities, the strength of the college lies in its congenial and enriching atmosphere, which plays a crucial role in maintaining the excellent record and standard of the college. The college has organized many national and international seminars in last few years. Moreover, we have a very dynamic, hardworking, and dedicated teaching staff, and they are inspiring our students for good performances in the examination and in all extracurricular activities. The college also organized many workshops for career counseling, psychological counseling, self-defense, and cultural activities to improve the personality, capacity building, and mental strength of the students. So about this webinar, first of all, I thank Dr. Bibhash Choudhury, Professor, Department of English, Gauhati University, for choosing such a meaningful and thought-provoking topic for this national webinar. In a monumental crisis like this pandemic, books have remained a strong pillar of the optimism for us. In the past too, pandemic like plague, Spanish flu in 1918 drastically altered the world. We all know that many great books were written to find cures from these life-altering events. Undoubtedly, books can teach us, guide us, heal us, and can become an indispensable companion when we face unprecedented catastrophic events like the pandemic that has become a grammar of chalk for us. So literature helps us understand good human relationship, projects the idea of solidarity and a sense of individual as well as collective responsibility in the time of darkness. Also, it can be seen that digital books have emerged as a popular alternative for reading during the pandemic. How do we read? What do we read? Why should we read? These questions became fundamental in our identity. We are sure that other mode of visual art forms like film, TV series can't replace the permanent impact of books in our life. I'm extremely hopeful that this webinar on pandemic reading culture and changing nature of books will surely throw valuable culture and humanity. Organizers and stakeholders. With this few words, I'd like to declare this webinar open. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Principal Sir, for your introductory as well as a brief introduction of the today's topic, as well as a brief introduction about our college. May I request all the participants, please don't share your screen. Please don't share your screen because it will create some problem. So now I request Dibyajyoti Bora, Assistant Professor, as well as the coordinator of today's webinar, to introduce today's resource person, as well as after that request Dr. Choudhury sir to continue his presentation. Mr. Bora, the mic is yours. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my privilege and pleasure to introduce Dr. Bibhash Choudhury sir to all of you. Dr. Bibhash Choudhury is a professor in English at Gauhati University. Dr. Choudhury sir is recognized as a formidable voice in Assamese literary criticism. As an immensely popular and great teacher, Choudhury sir has inspired, motivated, and stimulated the minds of thousands of students and research scholars inside and outside the classroom. His weekly Assam Tribune, a popular newspaper in Assam, is a testament to his voracious reading habit. Dr. Choudhury sir has written widely on English literature, literary history, literary theory, European literature, post-colonialism, and Assamese literature. His publication include English social and cultural history, beyond catastrophic, the beyond cartography, the contemporary South Asian novel in English, the theory, context and content which is published by Replace. He has also edited a good number of books, including Edward Said and the Politics of Culture, Amitabh Ghosh, Elegies, The Theory of Fiction, a Reader, Okhomia Chuti Golpo, published by NDT, and William Shakespeare. We are immensely pleased and honored to have such a distinguished personality amongst us. So without further ado, I request sir to deliver his lecture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dibbo. It is indeed a great privilege and honor to be part of this webinar organized by HPB Girls College. I have fond memories of visiting HPB Girls College, which I have had several occasions to do so. And when I visited last, I had referred to the in my presentation there to which was on book history, In my presentation there, I have referred to a figure called Aldus Manutius. And we had talked about how Aldus Manutius brought about the printing revolution, not only in Italy, uh, and of course, spread across different countries of Europe. Today, I'm going to do a little movement outside of Italy. And I'm going to start with something with which we are all familiar now, something which we have all heard about, and that is the Frankfurt Book Fair. Now, the Frankfurt Book Fair has had a very, very illustrious history. Not only is it a book fair, not only it is a gathering of people, of publishers, of writers, of readers, of booksellers, but it has had a very, very interesting history in the production of catalogs. And that is something with which I'd like to start. Now, from around the year 1564 to 1749, we have the record of the different catalogs being published by the Frankfurt Book Fair whenever it was held. Now, the historical documentation doesn't really give us the exact date when Frankfurt Book Fair was started, but it is suggested, or one of the historical propositions is that the Frankfurt Book Fair started around 1462, when some of the printers went to Frankfurt to exhibit their books, the books that they made. And that was when this whole process started. Now, what happened in Europe in the 15th and subsequently 16th and 17th century was that it was not confined only to the production of the book. It was also related to what we know as the reading culture. So for reading culture of books, there was a continuous process of development and engagement through which the world came to be seen in terms of the accessibility of knowledge. Now, books were one of the many vehicles of knowledge transference at the time in the 16th and 17th centuries. So when people went to the book fair, to Frankfurt, first of all, print culture, reading, book, those are new things at the time. So the first thing that they went and looked for was the catalog. So it was a visual documentation of the resources available for the reader. So reader of the printed book was a new thing. The reader of the manuscript, the reader of the handwritten manuscript was centuries older. But this new reader, the reader of the printed book, was a new development. This was a new self. So the reader of the printed book, when that person went to the Frankfurt Book Fair, which is not a book fair as such, but a display of produced books, then they were at sea, which to look for, what to read. So the documentation of the Frankfurt Book Fair catalog actually tells us a lot about the way book arrived for popular consumption, the way book arrived to the marketplace. And when we look at this, we also look at the study of what is known as book history. What is book history and how is it studied? Now, there have been very, very interesting arguments about this. What is book history, how to study, how to go about, how to really take up this issue globally. And one of the positions that have been argued has had to do with a man called Rolf Engelsing. Now, Rolf Engelsing came up with this idea of extensive reading and intensive reading. This is a very fascinating idea in the sense that Engelsing was a historian of ideas and also a historian of German culture. So what he proposed was that till the 19th century, reading was extensively intensive. Meaning, he said that people did not have much reading material. They had to go to the library, and especially in the early 17th century and early 18th century, even the individual books were very costly and hard to come by. So the common reader did not have much access to the book. The paperback was, of course, a much later development. So reading was intensive. We know that in the 18th century, throughout Europe, the library culture developed. People went to library, and people went to different, what we know through the coffee houses was to have different kinds of gatherings. And in those gatherings, one of the common things that appeared or was the subject of discussion was the newspaper. So intensive reading means they would read the news item and dissect it. There'll be gossips about it. There'll be questions asked about a news item, and so the newspaper was a very, very important vehicle and platform which could damage someone's career or lift someone up. We know the fate of John Keats, which was severely damaged because of the criticism that he faced in the Blackwoods magazine. So that was intensive reading. Now, Engelsing goes on to point out that this is something which changed with the coming of technology. Now, when technology arrived, when there was mass production, and when books were accessible, when reading became accessible, and reading became a part of the everyday culture of the modern man, then things changed in the sense that what Engelsing was talking about, maybe he was talking of the early 20th century, but something we find to be relevant even today, that we look at the newspaper headline and we move ahead. We have other things to do. We have to read things on our mobile. We have to read maybe something from a book or listen to the news. So the intensive reading was now replaced by extensive reading. So Engelsing pointed out that this was something that was part of the changing nature of the world and how the time was being utilized by the reader for the engagement with knowledge. So the reader in the modern period has come to feel that my reading time or my knowledge access is to be determined not only by the printed newspaper or printed organ, but by a lot of other things. So this is something that has happened. So what has happened is a different kind of sociability developed in the modern age, that we are now looking at a different kind of socially interactive knowledge gathering process. This is what Engelsing was talking about. Now in 1994, Sven Burkett's, it's a very famous book, and in a way it is a book which is now celebrating its 25th year. In 1994, Sven Burkett wrote a book called Gutenberg Elegies, The Fate of Reading in an Electronic Age. It was written even before the internet was there. In 1994, it was published, Sven Burkett's. But he was, in a way, very, very foresighted in anticipating how the printed book was now being challenged by alternative media. What were these different media? How were these different media platforms going to challenge the printed traditional book, the book between the paper covers? So Sven Burkett pointed out that Engelsing's argument about extensive reading has now acquired another dimension. And what is that dimension? That dimension is that the book has transformed into a commodity like any other. It has become a product, not the organ of knowledge, not something that is valued alone as the repository of knowledge, but one among many possibilities for the audience. So what is going to be the nature of knowledge itself and how it is going to be received and addressed? That became the question for Burkett. Now, this was not a new question, actually. This question was something that was articulated in the beginning of about 100 years ago, about almost 90 years ago, by a very, very prominent German intellectual, Walter Benjamin. Now, there is a history behind Walter Benjamin's theory of mechanization of knowledge. Now, in the year 1930, this is what Walter Benjamin writes later on. In the year 1930, Walter Benjamin went to visit a very famous bookstore in Paris, which was owned by a lady called Adrienne Monnier. Adrienne Monnier. Now, Adrienne Monnier, during a conversation, what happens when you go to a bookstore, you look at books, you talk about things, you discuss things, and how books are doing, those kind of things Walter Benjamin was discussing with Monnier. And the Monnier pointed out that and this is something which Walter Benjamin acknowledges in his whole idea of literary production. Monnier pointed out that an individual writer is not an individual. She pointed out that the individual is a result of a collective formation. So even if a writer says, I have done it myself, this is my work, or this is my view, Monnier pointed out that the book on the shelf is also responsible for the book beside it, the culture in which it has come, what it brings alongside it, what kind of reading was done, or what was heard by the writer, maybe directly, indirectly, that contributes to the making of the writer, not only the making of the book. So Monnier was proposing that there is a process of mechanization even before technology. That even before technology, mechanization in the sense that the receptivity apparatus of the writer is not something which is single track. It's something which is developed over a period of time through different perceptive mechanisms, which may not be always understood by the writer himself or herself at a given time. So there are a lot of modes of transmission knowledge which enters through the writer and comes to the public domain, something that was heard. And what Benjamin does is to develop this idea and give due credit to Monnier and say that, okay, see, this is what happens. This is what happens to knowledge, because knowledge travels. And knowledge travels, and knowledge also creates the self in society. The self comes to occupy its space in society through a collective formation. So this proposition of the great work, the great writer, of someone who has created something great, behind it, there is a culture or a particular process which contributes to the making of the book or that writer's writing. So the whole idea of the book author and the book author reader, that straight linear relationship, was now being seen and approached very differently. And this was in the time of what we know as the period of modernity, modernization in Europe and the Western world. So what happened at the time was that Benjamin was, because Benjamin was someone who was very sharp, and he caught on to this idea, and he proposed that what happens here is what Benjamin calls a miniaturization of culture. So maybe let's say there are 3 books on the idea of history. Someone like Collingwood or Fernand Braudel, okay, or E.H. Carr. Now, these are all miniature propositions of something which belongs to a larger cultural framework. 3 different writers talking about history from 3 different positions, each individualized, but they belong to a particular cultural worldview, which enables the reader to see them as part of a socializing process. That, okay, these kinds of books can be produced at this time, or they emerge at a particular time, and they reflect certain positions. So the collective formation idea is connected to the miniaturization process, that here is a possibility of looking at things from the larger point of view and also from the micro point of view, where we give credit to the individual, but also acknowledge the importance of the culture from which it has emerged. Sometimes it can be national, sometimes it can be transnational. So that the individuality of the writer is not lost, but a wider framework is also acknowledged. So to see a book and a writer simply as a kind of one and the other, or one being the creation of the other, this came to be reinterrogated in the early 20th century. So when Sven Barkitz talks about in 1994 about Gutenberg Elegies, when he says that, okay, see, now we have different platforms and different knowledge mechanisms, he is in fact taking it from something that Walter Benjamin had already highlighted, that in a digital age, in a mechanized age, the reception is bound to be different. But what is interesting, I'm not talking of the reception, I'll come to that. What I'm talking of is something is not highlighted about Walter Benjamin, is that he was also talking of the significance of the mode of production. But it's not something which emerges from the originality of a writer, but emerges from the coming together of different threads of culture manifested through the pen of a writer. This is something which he highlighted. Now, I would like to, since we are looking at a very broader picture, so I would like to move a little ahead from 1994, and I'd like to come to a very interesting development that happened in 2013. This is something which I followed with great interest, and this is something researchers, especially in the humanities, are going to be interested in. In 2013, there was a PhD scholar called Rebecca Schumann. Now, Rebecca Schumann was then, at the time, now she has her PhD, she was doing her PhD. And she was doing her PhD, and she wrote a very, at that time, seemingly innocuous kind of an article. But the title of the article, when it first came out and it created a controversy, I was intrigued by the whole idea surrounding it. And everyone who has done a PhD or is pursuing PhD will connect to that. What is the idea? What was the title of her essay? It is called thesis hatement, not thesis statement, but thesis hatement. So what was her argument? It started off as a funny kind of an argument. Her argument is that every researcher, she was saying that this is my personal view, but she was saying that this is what I feel and what I think other researchers too feel. That was what she wrote. And the website where she wrote it, you can find it there even today. It's called slate.com, S-L-A-T-E, slate.com. Rebecca Schumann, thesis hatement. So she was saying that there comes a time in the life of the researcher as he or she is working towards or his PhD, that you start hating your thesis or your argument. That you start disliking. There's a kind of distaste. There you feel very uncomfortable with the work you're doing, and it starts growing. It starts becoming a burden. Even if you love the subject, even if you're excited by the prospect of your research, there's something that goes into it. And this was this idea that there is a kind of a love-hate relationship with your work. This idea caught up, and it was shared. And I think by now there has been countless shares and reproduced, and it became the subject of articles in academic journals. What is this thing called thesis hatement? And what was she was actually venting her own angst has become a vehicle or site of critical engagement. So why am I bringing it in? Now, in 2013, 16, an article, a book was published by Amsterdam University Press, edited by Martin Luth and another editor. The name of the book was very interesting. It was called Unpopular Culture. There's something called popular culture, we know. This is something that started in the early part of the 20th century. But what they had proposed, and they discuss it, they discuss Rebecca Schumann's article as part of that examination, that there's something called unpopular culture. And unpopular culture is something that travels as widely as popular culture. Something that you don't like, something that you question, something that you criticize, something that really troubles you, something that you are completely against ideologically, you start commenting on it and it starts feeding on you. Unpopular culture. So unpopular culture has become one of the very, very significant subjects in the history of reading, not only in reading of the book, but also in the reading of different things across platforms. This is something which is very, very interesting, because the book, when I'm looking at the changing nature of the book has moved out of the covers, the paper covers, and now come to occupy different blogging sites, different platforms which are connected to new media. New media was something that was started in the 1970s by a Russian writer called Lev Manovich. But then today we are looking at something much wider. So this whole idea of new media, what it has done, it has challenged the very process of what we call canon formation. Great books. These are the great books. These are the great writers. So now reading has now a challenge, not only in terms of the mode of production, in terms of the platform, but also in terms of the subject. What is unpopular? What is questioned, hated, challenged, occupies as much of my reading space as something that I love and wonder about. This is very, very interesting in the changing nature of the reading habit. That today, something that I don't like, I'll be interested to know what's going on. And there are so many feeders to that. So this is what has been called, or what I would like to, I don't know whether there's a term like that, but I would call it focalization. FOLK, focalization. How it has appeared and occupied the space of folk culture. That means folk culture is not something which is different from the culture in which we live. It's the culture which we occupy. So folk, that means it has appeared and it has been transmitted to different sections of society. And it has actually crossed and dissipated the class or the economic divide. So irrespective of how I'm positioned, the thing that I hate, the thing that I don't like, that actually interests me as much as the thing that I like and love. This has now been facilitated by what we call the culture of reading outside the book, not inside the book, but outside the book. So today we have different modes of knowledge transmission, not occupied by the printed book, but where transmission is done through different platforms, through different modes, and that now determines the subjects available to the reader. Now, what happens, since our one of the things that we are looking at is also the nature of the pandemic and its effect on our reading habits. Now, I think all of us in different ways, we are looking for, among the many things that we are doing during this lockdown or during this crisis of the pandemic, is to look for a book that we read. Which is the book that I would like to read? Which is the book which I would have not read otherwise? Maybe because of time, maybe because I'm very busy, maybe because I would not have thought about it, but now I'm going to read. So if you look at the lists, different reading lists that have come up what are people, what is the book, or what are the books that people are reading at this time. And one very interesting book has emerged, and that is War and Peace. Now, War and Peace is not a small book. War and Peace is a huge book. It's a very expansive book with a huge cast of characters dealing with 19th century Russian society, very hierarchical society, different kind of society, really removed from the society we have. And yet, across continents, I followed the generation of interest in War and Peace, and I found that people in Russia, in America, in Britain, in different parts of Asia, including, I was fascinated by the interest in Pakistan, have started looking at War and Peace. Different formats of War and Peace are being downloaded and being read. So this making of the new template of reading is also determined by culture. So it is not a problem of unavailability or accessibility. It is the running out of things to do. So what do you read when you, okay, I have run out of the books on my bookshelf, so what do I read next? And what would actually give me a better sense of self? Okay, I've tried to read War and Peace, I could not. It's a boring book, it's a good book, it's an exciting book. So that War and Peace has come to occupy, and of course there will be a lot of other books which people have started reading or people have thought about reading, is because of the pandemic. So the pandemic has actually changed. Okay, so what was known as a quick read, I'm going to read it now. This is a book which I'm going to finish in maybe 2 days. But since I have time, I'll give 1 week or 10 days, maybe 15 days to this book. So let me try out War and Peace. So you see how things are changed contextually because of the circumstance in which an individual finds himself or herself. Now, so can we say there have been different articles published? If you look at different newspapers digitally, the New Yorker or the New York Times or Washington Post or Telegraph of the UK, that now people are see what the pandemic has done is the pandemic has equalized people. It has brought everyone to the same plane. Is it like that? Now, I'm fascinated by a very interesting story. It's a story I think you must have read, but I'd like to just refer to the story again. It's a story which was written in 1961, which was published in fact in 1961. It is by a very, very interesting writer, an American writer, Kurt Vonnegut. The story is Harrison Bergeron. Harrison Bergeron. You must have read the story. What is Harrison Bergeron? Harrison Bergeron, remember the story was written in 1961. And Harrison Bergeron is a very short story. What is the story like? It starts that the year was 2081. That's the first sentence of the story, if I can recall. The year was 2081. And finally, everyone was equal. So in the year 2081, everyone was equal. And then Vonnegut goes on to say that everyone equal not in the eyes of God or in the eyes of law. Everyone was equal in any which way. The phrase actually struck and it stayed with me. Everyone was equal in any which way. That means no one is more beautiful than others. No one had better intelligence than others. How was this done? He created a very interesting term. He created a term called the United States Handicapper General. The United States Handicapper General was an agency. So if I have more intelligence than someone else, there will be something which will be done to my brain. A signal will go, okay, this person is thinking differently, and there will be a hit, and I'll come down. And if I'm say handsome, or if I'm more beautiful than others, then there will be a lot of things attached to me, so that I am not visually to be seen. So everything was flattened. So the question being asked here is between, there's one family, there is the father called George, and there is the mother called Hazel, and the protagonist of the story, Harrison, is their son. So one day, because these monitors, brain monitors, don't really work for Harrison, there's something wrong with them. So he started thinking differently. He started thinking differently, and of course, it was detected, and he was arrested. He was put in jail. And one day he escapes from jail, and there was a great crisis that, okay, Harrison has escaped from jail. So then Harrison was caught. Before he was caught, he goes to a TV studio. There is a TV presenter who is blindingly beautiful. That is what Vonnegut says, writes. And Harrison is also very, very handsome. So he proclaims that he is the new governor, and he is going to rule the country, and he is going to marry this presenter. And of course, before the takes place, he's shot. And his father and mother were watching the news. And before they can really be sad about it. So the mother asked, "Did you watch the news?" The father says, "Oh, I watched." "What is it like?" "No, it's nothing." The whole feeling is, so what Vonnegut is saying, that complete equalization is actually making fun of it. The whole idea of equality and flattening of the world is an impossible dream. So when we say that here is globalization and everyone is equal, it's not. It's never without caveats. Yes, of course, there is this equality of opportunity, but how is someone going to read and how someone is going to respond is something that is to be left to the individual. Is not to be determined by, okay, this is, you can't be like Orwell's thought police. Okay, this is what you read, this is how you interpret, this is how you're going to present. This is not going to work. So the evening of society, the flattening of society has taken place in terms of technology, but not in terms of thought. So what we find today is that there is the process of self-replication, but in the catching up. So if I feel, oh, so and so has read War and Peace, I must also read War and Peace. That can happen, but it's not necessary that my reaction or my response or my understanding, my writing of it will be the same as someone else. So in that sense, I find the representation of Vonnegut very interesting. It's a dystopian story. It's a futuristic story, but he also warns that more and more technologization brings with it the challenge for the individual. Now, I am reminded in this context of a short story. It's not a short story. It's actually one paragraph, about, I think, 5-6 lines. A short story called, it was not published during Kafka's lifetime. It's by Kafka. I think you must have read it. It's called A Little Fable. Very interesting, and it makes you think so much. What happens here is, it's one paragraph. What happens here is that there is a mouse, and the mouse is he moves towards, he's moving ahead, and he suddenly realizes, the mouse realizes, oh, there's a trap. I'm walking into the trap. Okay, so then the mouse turns around, and the mouse says, I'm walking the trap. The world is shrinking more and more. Earlier, the walls were far away. The walls were not near me. I could move about here and there. So many roads I could go to. Now the walls have shrunk, and I find myself here, and I'm in front of the trap. So behind him, there's a cat. And the cat then tells the mouse, you should have changed your direction. And then the cat eats the mouse. That's the end of the story. Now the point Kafka is trying to make, or it has been interpreted in different ways. There's a lot of interpretation regarding the story. The point Kafka is trying to make, that are we really pushing ourselves into a trap, say look at our social media habits. We take up an issue, we write about it, we question certain things, we challenge certain things, we take a position, and then are we really walking into a trap from which we cannot retreat? Are we giving ourselves as individuals that space to maneuver where I can say, okay, I can breathe? Or are we pushing ourselves into a corner, maybe by following an ideology, maybe by doing this or doing that, or taking a position that okay, we are in front of me is the trap and behind me is the cat. So very interesting argument that is proposed by Kafka. Now when I was thinking of this, and I was struck by one very interesting book which was written by Carlo Ginzburg. Carlo Ginzburg is an Italian philosopher and Italian historian, and the name of the book is The Cheese and the Worms. Now, why it struck me, because it has something to do with the Kafkan fable in the sense I'm trying to frame it. Now, Carlo Ginzburg published his book, I think, around 1976. There, in that book, Carlo Ginzburg talks not about something that he is proposing. He talks about a man who lived in the 16th century, who died in 1599, called Menocchio. Menocchio was an ordinary man. He was not part of the elite. He was not an artist. He was not someone who is very rich. He didn't come from a noble family. And this was the time of the Inquisition. Now, what Menocchio did, and how this is connected to reading culture. What Menocchio did was that Menocchio proposed that he was caught because it was said that he was indulging in blasphemy against Christianity, against God, and he was caught. So there are two trial sessions. In the first trial session, he was asked, something like this is going on in our society today. Whenever I find the questions being asked about what are you reading, I'm reminded of Menocchio. Now, Menocchio was asked, what are you reading? How did you come across these views, these blasphemous views, these anti-God views? And he said, no, I'm reading this and I'm reading that. And the book list is available in Carlo Ginzburg's book. Most of them are in Italian. And these are books which tells us about the kind of books that are read by the ordinary Italian citizen. They are not hard to find books. They're not books which are to be found in monasteries. They're not leather-bound hard books, but they're easily accessible books. And one was a very interesting book in the sense that it tells us about the travel of ideas. Okay, one was an Italian translation, a Latin translation of the Quran. And there were other books on art, books on music, books on the importance of dance, books on cooking. These are the books that he listed before the judge during the trial. And this is what Ginzburg discusses in his book, The Cheese and the Worms. The idea of Cheese and the Worms was that, very interesting, because Menocchio was reading, amongst other things, he was also reading about science, about the cosmos. And his proposition, even today, when you look at Ginzburg's book and you look at what Menocchio said at trial, it appears to us to be really courageous given that time, given the time, 16th century. And what did he say? He said that the whole world was chaos. And when the world was chaotic, suddenly matter was formed. This was something which was in circulation. This was not Menocchio's idea, but he got it from the books he read. And these things were were part of the society in which he lived. So he said that there is a cheese, there is a plot of cheese, there is a block of cheese, and then there are the appearance of worms. Who are these worms? Among these worms are, one is Lucifer, one is Michael, and he names the 4 archangels and says then there is a another worm who is a captain of these worms, and that is God. And of course, the church could not tolerate it. How can that be acceptable? The cheese and the worms. That, okay, the cheese is being controlled by the worms, and who is going to get how much and what is going to be territory, this is being controlled by. So what Ginsberg was looking at was not only book history, reading culture, not only Melochios habits, but also the play of power and the politics of governance. It is the politics of governance which actually starts controlling the way we see society and where the government sees its people. So this is something which appears to me to be very fascinating, in the sense that Ginsberg talks about something which is a movement away from a man. I have to go back from 1976 to the year 1922. In 1922, there was a man called Walter Lippmann. Now, Walter Lippmann is a very, very interesting man for different reasons. One was that Walter Lippmann is associated with a journal, a magazine which appeared at the time. He's the founder of the magazine. It's called a New Republic. But I'm going to refer to a book he wrote, which was highly influential and started influencing psychologists. The name of the book is called Public Opinion. What is public opinion? That was his argument. He proposed that public opinion is determined by the stereotype. Now, if you look at the word stereotype, if you look at the history of the word stereotype, you will see that the word stereotype is actually, it originated not with the way we use it today. Oh, this is stereotypical. Oh, this is a stereotype. We don't look at it. Was not the origin. The word stereotype was connected to the printing plate, the type. That means the letter, the making of the letter in printing. So what Lippmann did was to see it as a part of a stereotyping process. Oh, this person is like that, that person is like that, this is the view held by these people, this is the discourse. So he was trying to help the American presidential government and trying to argue that, okay, if you want to control these people, then this is how you have to approach them, because these people think like that. And I was reminded of Walter Lippmann, not in connection with this, but when the killing of George Floyd happened in America, the whole stereotyping, okay, that these are the blacks and blacks are like this. This reminded immediately me of Walter Lippmann and his whole idea of how things are to be seen. I read recently in the District of Columbia, which is now has become a state, there was a decision taken that they're going to bring down the statue of Abraham Lincoln, because Abraham Lincoln in that statue has in front of him a black man kneeling after the emancipation. So what you see here is that again the flattening of the template. That, okay, this is how people are to be seen. This is how blacks are to be seen and understood and approached. The margin center structure. That here are the people who are at the margin, and this is how they are to be seen, and this is how they are to be satisfied. So what I find here is something that is a kind of repetition of what Walter Lippmann wrote 100 years ago. This stereotyping process. And this is not confined to the governance mechanism. This is something which is related to individual's response to society. How do I stereotype the other? How do I choose the book to read? How do I look at a disease? How do I look at a particular website? Why do I visit certain YouTube channels? Everything has to do with this kind of programming that Kurt Vonnegut was satirizing. Without realizing, we are submitting ourselves to a kind of programming that is taking place. And it has no center. We can't say this person is doing it or that person is doing it. It's not like Big Brother is watching you, but it's something where there is a self-automated mechanism, which is part of the whole cultural process. And this has become so interesting because the framing of knowledge has to do with a sense of discipline, order. That I want to present myself as this. Even in my position, if I were to say that, oh, I don't know anything, I don't read books, I don't like these things, even that is a position that I take, and that is the framing of the knowledge question. That this is my self-making, what Greenblatt called self-fashioning. And in this case, it is not simply me, but it is also the listener, the viewer, the one that I am responding to. And in this context, I would like to go to a particular poet, which you have all read. He was a Roman poet called Ovid. Ovid was known for different kinds of writings. One of them is Metamorphoses. But in what I find interesting in this context, that Ovid has said something very fascinating about the history of reading. And that has to do with Ovid's love poems. Ovid wrote a lot of love poems. They're translated differently. And in one of his love poems, he writes a letter. There's a manual. How are you going to take your letter to your lover? And there he says that because this was the nobility. So even reading was a privilege. Not everyone would read. And if you are positioned higher up in society, you're not going to read. Someone is going to read, you're going to listen. So the servant is going to come. The lover is going to send a letter to a servant, and the servant is going to read, and you're going to listen what your lover has to say. Now, therefore, there is the listener. And I find this coming back. Okay? I find this coming back. It is the use of euphemism. You use a different kind of language, which the lover will understand, the servant will not. And this is something, this is connected to cryptology. So you fashion a different kind of language. That means you are talking to the public, but you're also talking to someone specific. You're making your movie. But just like Walter Allen. Walter Allen, it is said that he makes his movie for someone in particular, but everyone watches it and sees different things. So this is something which Ovid was talking about. The listener as reader, the viewer as listener. And this is, so what has happened now is an intermixing of platforms. The vocal, the verbal, the visual have all come together. And even silence has now come to occupy its space in society. So when I was thinking of this, I was thinking of, since it is a question of the pandemic, I was thinking that, okay, what happens in the pandemic? In pandemic, there is a process of self-replication. The transfer is done through what is known as pathogens. Now, of course, I am not a medical student, so I have very limited idea about what goes on in the transference of a viral disease. But from what we have seen and heard and has been discussed during these many months. So what I have seen is that there is a self-replicating mechanism. It starts controlling not only the host, but also the one it infects. So we can see that this is what is very interesting in terms of the reading habits that we develop. Who am I listening to? Who am I talking to? How am I being influenced? Sometimes the influence can be in terms of a reaction against. Oh, you are talking about this. I am going to show you. So I'm going to read something different. I'm going to read, not going to read this. Even that, it takes us back to Rebecca Schumann. This is hatement. But I read because I hate you. I'm going to read what you read. I'm going to read different. So you see how the whole dynamics of the culturing of the self has changed because of the pandemic. Now, of the many books that have emerged, in the in the recent years, and I'm going to refer specifically to one particular book which is published in 2018, 2 years ago. It was called Severance. It was by a Chinese writer called Ling Ma, Ling, Ling, Ma Ma. And this book, Severance, is about a flu, Shen flu, which originates in a particular province in China, comes to Beijing, and then it starts affecting everyone. It becomes a globally transmitted disease. And then there is a character called Candace, and she is someone. So we see two things. Severance is separation. Two different worlds: pre-pandemic world and post-pandemic world. And why is this book so fascinating? Because this was published in 2018. There was no COVID then. But when you read the book, you'll find it, okay, this is talking about something which is exactly very similar to what we're experiencing now. How our relationships are altered, and the challenges that we face as individuals in this society, in this period, in the time of pandemics. And so severance is something that actually talks about the separation that has taken place, the physical separation that has taken place between and amongst people. So this is something that appears to me to be a very interesting book related to the pandemic, because of this coincidental connection. One, that she is a Chinese origin writer. She stays in the United States, Ling Ma. She talks about a travel of a virus from China, occupies the whole world, talks about pre-pandemic, post-pandemic world, and how things change. And even after the pandemic is over, relationships are no longer back to where they were. So what we can see here is that the book has only changed its outer cover. I mean, the question of whether the physical book is going to stay. This has been a very interesting question. Is the physical book staying? And in fact, this has been a question for a long time. Almost 30 years, people have been talking about the physical book. Is the physical book going to stay? Lee Price, you may be interested in Lee Price. Lee Price has written many books on the future of books. And is the book going to stay? That is one of her important areas. And in a book which was published last year, she talks about the increase in the physical book. Now, why is the physical book being produced more, especially in Western countries, is that it is now being seen as something very close and very dear. So it takes us back to Rolf Engelsing's idea of intensive and extensive reading. If you go to the 19th century, for instance, if you look at Queen Victoria had a copy of In Memoriam by her bedside, because that was something that she says, she wrote about it. She said that whenever I feel sad or depressed or down, I turn to In Memoriam. So she read it again and again, marked it again and again. So it's intensive reading. So the book has now come, the physical book has now come to take that place again. So this is what Lee Price argues. And of course, there'll be different positions on this matter, whether the physical book is going to stay or this physical book is going to go away. But what is interesting is that something that was part of the process of self-formation, how the self is formed, and how it has developed into a responsive site, each individual, that has now become a very, very interesting area, the self as the subject of study. So even when I introspect, even if I think, okay, this is how I have done and this is who I am, even there, to go back to Adrienne Monier's idea, that there is a collective formative process at work. I am not who I am. I'm not alone. Yet I am individual in a very different way. So you can argue different ways. You can say that I am the summary of what I read. Or you could say I am the summary of what I choose not to read, or what I listen to, what I see, what I talk to, or what I remain silent about. I think I'll end my discussion on this note. And I once again thank everyone, especially everyone at HPB Girls College, and all the participants who have taken part in this seminar, in this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Uh,
Thank you, Santulan.
again, it was nice to have you once again among us. Uh, the pandemic, reading culture, and the changing nature of books. I- Sir, as per our conviction, you kept us mesmerized throughout the session. And I would like to thank Vipul Chandra Bhuya for encouraging us to organize this webinar and providing all the necessary assistances. Then I must our RKC coordinator, Dr. Pola Khandikoi. Actually, he is the guy who pushed every one of us to organize the webinars. So he deserves this credit that it was because of him that we could organize this webinar. And then also our two coordinators, Dr. Deepa Fukan Borua, who is the head of the department, and Dr. Dibrojyoti Bora. I thank them for their promptness and enthusiasm in organizing this webinar. And of course, how can we forget the overwhelming responses of the participants? Without you, all this would have been worthless. So thank you all for your responses, attendance, and patience, which have encouraged us to organize many more such events in future. So thank you all. And after this webinar, you will get one feedback link in your emails. So please do fill it up to get the certificates. Thank you. Thank you, sir, once again.
Uh, Thank you, Santulan, for your encouraging vote of thanks. I also thank from our IQSC cell to respected PC sir, Bibhash Choudhury sir, for his very thought-provoking and very illuminating presentation. We are very much grateful that whenever we invite Choudhury sir, always Choudhury sir is among with us. It is our great pleasure that again we are able to listen his very interesting or very clear speech or very interesting speech about a very relevant topic in the pandemic situation. I am very much happy. On behalf of the IQSC, I again thank Choudhury sir for his speech, for his encouragement. I also thank our principal sir and Department of English as well as the all faculty members as well as the participants from IQSC cell for their active participation. Otherwise, this seminar, this webinar had not been happened. So I just make an announcement that feedback link will be sent to your mail, and you have to submit the feedback, and after that the certificate will be provided only after 7th of July, because we have a series of webinar. So we have a very small work team, so we have to do lots of things. So tomorrow itself we have two programs, one special talk on uh, regarding the Ramayana of tribal languages of Assam, and there is also one webinar in the afternoon session at 2:30. The title of the webinar is Intellectual Property Rights. Those who are interested to join this webinar or special talk, they can register before 7 p.m. Today. After 7 p.m. the link will be closed. So I request if anybody want to join, they can register. And one thing that we have a 250 maximum, we can 250 directly live in this particular Google Meet. But we have a Facebook live page, HPB Girls College. Those who want to uh, join this webinar or join the special talk, they can move to this particular web Facebook page. So I just now announce that the webinar is over. I request Sumit Sharma to close the webinar. Thank you. Thank you very much.
তুমি একটা ম্যাগি নিয়ে কি করবা কত ম্যাগি না দিন নিলা ওনাই কত নিয়া খাইতো না ওনাই খাইতো কত কত নিবা 10 টাকা কি 20 টাকা ব্রাশ এইখানে না ওটা তো কথা কিনা দোকানে যাবে এবার ওইখানেই তো কত খাবো আনবি ওইদিকে হ্যাঁ জিনিস কি আনো কি শোনাই যা সুন্দর গানা তুই তো করছিস জিরার গুঁড়া জানো বা কি জানি lain enggak? নিচে নাও ব্যাগটা চলো হুম এটা না আগে আগে আরো আগে নাকি এখানে আগে ডার্ক পেপার দিদি তো একটা হইব একটা হইব ওইটা হইব আরো পিঙ্ক নেই আরো বেলেগ নেই আরো রেড আছে রেড নাই ব্লু আছে সব একদম হ্যাঁ এটা আরো আর নাই না হ্যাঁ একদম হালকা ভালো লাগবে না এটা নিতে পারি সবুজটা এটা দিদিও এটা হুম। একদম হালকা লাগে